Hello, hello. Welcome to another stream. Now, I said last night that I didn't know when I was going to stream next, and today is that day. I also said that I'd wanted to do something different than normal, so that's what we're going to do. Today is going to be practice approaches. Now, for right now, we're going to just treat this as if we're doing a, IFR lesson in the Minneapolis area, and we'll go from there. And then if anyone joins and has a fun, rather challenging approach that they want me to try to shoot, we will go ahead and do that. But yep, something different than normal. Getting away from the career mode in Flight Sim 2024 while we're still waiting on an update, and something different than a VATSIM flight with a 737 in Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. So we're going to do some practice approaches today, and we're going to treat this as if it's a lesson for now. So we're flying the Piper Archer, which is what I'm doing my CFII in right now, actually. So that's kind of what gave me the idea to do this type of stream with the practice approaches. Piper Archer 2 specifically. I do have a real-life checklist that we can follow that I use on the daily when I'm practicing CFII. And we're going to start simplistic, and we're going to try and get more challenging as we get towards the end of the stream. So there we go. Now we have it. Let's get in the cockpit and start our lesson. All right. So we're going to start off by doing the RNAV runway 36 into Buffalo, Minnesota. This is a pretty simple RNAV. It has a procedure turn at the end, and then after the procedure turn, it's just a nice on-course approach to final. We do have LPV, which gives us a glide slope, localizer performance with vertical guidance, and the missed approach procedure is also pretty simplistic. Then from there, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go onto the VOR Alpha into the same airport, which is a little more challenging. It's got a few more steps. It's got more to do. So that's going to be a really fun one. And then we'll do the published missed on that as well. The thing about the VOR Alpha is it does not go into the airport on, the approach course of a runway. It's actually perpendicular. So we're really going to want to pay attention and, follow this approach correctly so we can safely shoot the approach and make it to the airport. And then from there, we'll probably find an ILS somewhere, and hopefully by the end of those three approaches, someone may join in and give us something fun to do, maybe elsewhere. I know places in Alaska have a lot of fun approaches and so forth, so we'll go from there and see what we get. All right. So let's go ahead and get rid of the yoke so I can see most of the aircraft. Alright, right on. So, we have our real-life checklist here for the Archer 2, and we're going to use it appropriately. And we did our pre-flight procedures, our walk-around is all good, set before start the passenger briefing. You guys have been briefed. Seats and seatbelts, we'll just say they're secure. Parking brake is in fact set. Cool. Flaps are retracted. Double check. The Johnson bar is all the way down. Sweet. Circuit breakers are all in. Let's get rid of this yoke just to verify. They are all in. Nothing is popped out. Good to go. And electrical equipment is all off. Alright. So now we have our plan. We have our before starting procedure. Now we'll go to our starting procedure. Alright. To get this baby started up, we're going to do battery, master, and alternator is going on. Fuel selector is lowest tank. Right now they're both topped. We're on the left tank, so we'll just stay there for now. Fuel pump will turn on and check the pressure. The pressure is in the green, so the fuel pump is good, and the pressure remains sweet. Carb heat is off. The mixture is rich. Throttle is going to be a 1/4 of an inch open. We're going to prime the engine as required. I set the weather to, the ceilings being about 900 to 1,000 feet, so we have low ceilings to simulate actual IFR conditions, which is going to be really fun. And I also have the weather warm, so we don't experience any icing as we're doing these approaches, as this aircraft does not have de-icing capabilities. So we'll go ahead and give it 3 pumps on the primer. Nice and slow, make sure the fuel gets in there. Sweet. Alright, engine is primed. Anti-collision lights are coming on. We'll make sure the prop area is clear. These guys are definitely closer than I would like them to be, but they're definitely not going to move, so we're just going to pretend they're not there. Other than that, we're good. Open the door. Clear prop. Nice. Alright, and then we're going to engage the starter. Sweet. Our engine is started, it's running, we have a nice steady RPM. Excellent, this guy just walked right through the prop. See, the people in the vehicles in this sim, man, it makes kind of no sense. Oh well. Not too bad. Alright. Throttle, we're going to go 1,000 RPM, so we're going to bump that up just a little bit. The oil pressure, we're looking for 60 to 90, which is this green area right here on the engine gauges. We are in the green, it's between 60 and 90, that's good. And ammeter, we're looking for a positive charge, which right here we do have a positive indication on the charge above 0. So everything's good there. Starting procedures checklist is complete. Now we'll do before taxi. So we're going to pull the mixture back, because as we taxi, we don't want to be too rich on the mixture and foul our spark plugs. Avionics are going to come on. There we go. We'll wait for those to load. As we're waiting for everything to load, our transponder, we're going to be IFR, so the standard IFR code is 2000. So we'll go ahead and do that, 2000. We'll go ahead and just, we already have it on altitude mode, so we're going to leave it there. Transponder set. Altimeter, alright, we can actually pick up the ATIS here, hopefully, which is 124.9er at the Flying Cloud Airport. Let's see if we can grab it. Our GPS is up to date. Everything is via Microsoft Flight Sim, which is good. We'll go ahead and make sure that the OBS is detected as we spin our navigational aid here, which it is. It's moving along with. Cool. Oh, half left, out of view. Half up, out of view. Where are we looking for that? Oh, you know what? We are in, we're likely in V-lock mode, so that might not be the case here. Alright. Enter. Yeah, we are on V-lock. If this was on GPS, it would have probably had this, navigational aid half up and half out. So it doesn't look like we're picking up ATIS at all. Kind of curious if it... Yeah, ATIS is 124.9. We should... So that's the speaker, but we're not able to pick up anything. Okay. Kind of strange not to have the ATIS working as we turn our speaker on here. Let's see if it works on nav 1. If we put it on, or not nav 1, com 1, excuse me. Com 1, switch to 1249, see if that does anything. It does not. Okay. So I'm not sure whether this aircraft, if you can tune into frequencies manually for the in-game ATC or what, but that's not working. So it is preset weather, and it's set to standard pressure, so we're going to roll with standard pressure because that's what it is. And then as far as the winds, we'll just go ahead and look at the windsock. The winds are favoring the 2/8, so we're going to go ahead and use the 2/8 for departure. So the altimeter is set, standard pressure good, heading indicator is set, it matches the magnetic compass. I do have precession off in the sim, just because in the sim it'd be really difficult to use the mouse to keep having to correct for the precession, so we're just, precession is off, we don't have to worry about that here. Anti-collision lights are still on, that's good. Nav lights, it's not nighttime, so we'll be fine there, but you know, we could just turn them on. Since we are going in IMC condition, it never really hurts. Landing light will turn on before we taxi or enter a taxiway. We will switch the fuel tanks, make sure that the other tank is running. Fuel pressure still up, Engine's still running. Excellent. And then the brakes we will release and test. Alright. So we'll release the parking brake. And then we'll just make sure that these brakes are working as necessary. Come on. Go, go, go. Okay, cool. Alright, the brakes work. That's what I like to see. Alright, we'll go ahead and go to our run-up area over here, do a quick run-up just to show you guys how we do that. Oh yeah, this thing's cruising now. Oof. Promise I'm not that aggressive with the brakes in real life. Alright, so why don't we go ahead and simulate a run-up here. So let's put the parking brake on. Let's do mixture rich. We're going to do 1800 RPM on the throttle. There we go, 1800 RPM on the throttle. Now we're going to test our mags. So we're going to go to left mag. We're looking for a 50 to 150 drop. That was about 100, which is good. We'll go back to both. It raises back up. Good. Now we'll go to the right mag. Alright, also about 100 drop, and we have no more than a 50 differential, which is good. Now we're going to test the carb heat. It was a very minimal drop, but it did drop. Yep, now it's very slowly coming back up. When you put the carb heat on in real life, this is going to drop faster than that. It's a pretty immediate reaction on the RPMs, but that's fine. Engine gauges, we're going to check are in the green, 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 green. Sweet. Alternator, says to, put on the pitot heat and check the load. You can do that. It adds a little bit of amperage to the alternator reading. Turn that off, you see the alternator decrease a little bit, but you can also turn the alternator off, and watch this indicate 0 right here. Then you turn the alternator back on, and boom, we have a positive charge, so the alternator works that way. Depending on how your aircraft reacts, I personally like to do the pitot heat test, but some people shut their alternator off and make sure that it reads 0 when it's off, and then positive charge when you turn it back on. So, personal preference, I guess. I don't really see the benefit in turning your alternator off in case for whatever reason it wouldn't come back on if you flipped it back on. So I personally suggest the pitot heat version, but that's just something that people do. Alright, suction gauges. We're looking for 4.9 to 5.1, which this looks like it's right about 5.0. Remember, we do have a parallax, seeing as how this is on the right side of the aircraft and we're in the left seat, so we got to account for that parallax, and that looks about 5.0 to me, so the suction gauges are good. Throttle can now come down to 1000 RPM. Love to see it there. Alright, engine primer is in and locked, looking good there. The annunciator panel, we'll push to test that. We'll make sure every light illuminates, which it does. And then as we let go, they all extinguish. Perfect. The annunciator panel is working in proper order. The heading indicator, no need to reset. Again, the precession is off in the simulator. Alternate static is under the left side of the aircraft here. It doesn't seem like we can reach it very well in the sim, but you would change this little lever, right here. And instead of the static port on the pitot mast under the wing, giving you static pressure for your instruments, it starts pulling static pressure from the inside of the cabin. And the way that you would look for that to work is when it switches to the cabin pressure is a little bit lower than the outside air pressure because of the air moving around the aircraft. And what would happen is the VSI would start briefly indicating a climb when you switch to your alternate static. So that's what you're looking for, but since we can't reach it, we will omit it in the flight sim. The pitot heat we don't need on right now We will be turning that on when we get in the clouds just to avoid any possible probe icing. Circuit breakers we checked. We'll double check are all in. They're good. Circuit breakers are looking excellent. Instrument and radios are all set. We will not worry about the comm radios. We're offline. We're not on VATSIM or anything like that, so we'll just do this on our own. Because if someone gives me a good approach to do, I'm going to exit out and, you know, load in the air to shoot an approach elsewhere. Cabin door, make sure it's secure. We got the down latch position, and we got the latched position on top as well, and then you would give it a nice elbow to make sure that it's actually locked in place, that nothing could pop that door open in flight. Good. Flight control is free and correct. Alright, let's check that. So we're going to go full left aileron. The left aileron comes up. The right one goes down. We'll go left aileron. So the left one is full up. And the left one is full down. Sweet. We'll go ahead and pull back on the elevator. Elevator back. Elevator forward. Alright, our flight controls are free and correct. That's what I like to see. Alright. And the parking brake will release. Alright, so now that we're done with our run-up, we're going to go ahead and pull the mixture back again so we can eliminate any possible fouling of the spark plugs. And now we're going to load the approach that we're shooting. So how are we going to do that? We're going to go to the GPS here. We're going to go to this direct to button right here. And you can actually go to... usually it's not on that setting. Let's say clear. There we go. You can go to the direct to button, and this is what you should see initially, but for some reason in the sim it seems to already have started with a K code. That's not typically what you're going to see in the real GPS. So you should see this where the whole entire line for your airport code is blinking, and then you use the big knob to go down to nearest, and Kilo Charlie Foxtrot Echo is the code for the Buffalo Airport, and that's how we'll put in our destination. Interesting. Maybe it's not close enough to Flying Cloud. So now what we'll do is we'll actually we'll go in there. Oh, I'm trying to push the cursor here. Why don't we get off of that page and redo it? All right, now we're back on the K code. So looks like nearest didn't really work all that well. For some reason, I'm stuck on the nearest page. Okay, let's clear that. Okay. Nope. Direct to. I'm not really sure what's going on with this GPS right now. It's it keeps... What should happen is when I clear and I get off the page here, I click direct to, and I should be able to just use the small knob to put the letters, but for some reason it keeps auto going to the nearest airport. So why don't we click an airport in there and then try and fix it. Okay, that worked. So a little bit of a bug with the avionics, so just select an airport on the nearest list and then just go back and manually put it in. So Kilo Charlie Foxtrot X-ray, or not X-ray, Echo, my apologies. Buffalo Municipal, Minnesota. So we'll throw that in, enter, activate, and then we're going to start this approach at Jonah, which is the initial approach fix to eliminate the procedure turn, because like I said, we're going to start off easy and then we'll go from there. So we'll select the approach and then we'll enter RNAV 36 and we'll scroll down to Jonah, enter, and we'll activate. And now this eliminates the procedure turn because on the approach plate, which I'll show you right now, on the approach plate right here, when you go from Jonah right here, the initial approach fix, you see this no PT. That means no procedure turn. So we can go from Jonah and go straight to HuBev, which is the intermediate fix, and then go straight into the approach without the procedure turn. So that's what I'm looking at. Nice. All right. So now we have our approach loaded. Everything's looking good. All of the waypoints are in the correct order. I like it, so we'll hit the clear button, and now we're going to get a path on our GPS here, and we switched from V-lock to GPS mode with the CDI knob right here. So now we have the approach loaded, we have a path loaded, we know where we're going, we're in GPS mode. We're looking very good to begin this process. Alright, so let's go ahead and release the parking brake. And now we're going to be ready to taxi, so we'll turn the landing light on. And we'll give it a little power so we can begin moving. Alright, and then since the winds are favoring the 2/8, we're going to make a left on Alpha here. And we're going to clear left, we're going to clear right, and we are cleared to cross. And since we are in a Piper Archer, we don't really need to use the longer main runway. We can take off of 2/8 right just fine. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to go 2/8 right, which begins at the end of Alpha over here, before it becomes a non-movement area. Did buy a brand new gaming chair, which is super comfortable, but I think I have it a little high right now. So I'm just going to drop it down a little bit after we stop, so I'm a little more comfortable on the taxi. Just a quick little... There we go, that's feeling a lot better. Okay, yeah, I like that a lot. Cool. Alright, so we'll do our before takeoff checklist here that we have. So the fuel quantity we're checking. Fuel quantity's looking good. Both tanks are still topped off. Engine gauges are green, 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 green. Excellent. Transponder is 2000. Altitude mode is on. Love it. Just gonna verify. Cool. Yep, altitude mode. And fuel pump's coming on. The landing light is on. The mixture is gonna go rich. Flaps, we're going to do a normal takeoff, so the flaps are going to be all the way retracted. Trim, it's hard to tell on this sim with this particular aircraft. It doesn't look like there's an indicator. If it is, it's behind this part of the seat, so we're just going to go ahead and feel it as we go. Typically when you load in the sim, it's in takeoff mode, so you should be fine. Seatbelts, we'll say it's secured. And then takeoff commit point brief. If anything happens on the runway, if the engine fails or we get a weird indication, we'll throttle to idle, max brake, and maintain directional control on the runway, and we will stop on the runway and then return to the FBO. If anything happens 0 to 500 feet, we're going to go anything that is within 30 degrees of the nose, we will land on. 500 to 1,000, anything in front of the wings we can land, and if we are 1,000 or above, we will either find the best place to land, or we will turn back towards the airport if we have enough altitude to do so. And since I am solo, if anything does happen, I will be flying the aircraft, and I will be also running checklists if I have enough altitude. Alright, so that's the takeoff commit point brief. We're ready to go. Let's begin these practice approaches. So now we're going to take the runway 28 right here. And we're going to apply full power. Keep our hand on the throttle in case we have to reject takeoff for whatever reason. Maintain center line. Alright, we have takeoff power. Airspeed is alive. The engine gauges are green. good. That's about 60 knots. We'll slowly pull the nose up so we rotate. Nice and easy. There we go. Alright, now we're going to go VY, which in the Archer is 79 knots, I believe. Maybe it's 76. It might be 76, to be honest with you. I fly so many different Pipers. Each of them are 3 knots off on VY and all of their V speeds. So, let's see. Am I correct? VY is 76. Alright, so we'll maintain 76 knots here. And when it comes to GPS tracking, I really like this page right here because it gives you the desired track on the bottom, and then this gives you the actual track that you're following on top. So what we're going to do is our desired track is going to be 267, but since we're right of course, we're going to go ahead and turn to a lesser number than the 267 right there. 10 degrees off is good enough to intercept our track. We're going in the clouds, so the pitot heat is going to come on. So is the... Well, nah, the carb heat in the Piper is more of a after icing effect than it is anything else. So now we're turning. We're starting to intercept our track. We're getting a message on our GPS. We'll see what that is. Approaching VNAV profile. Yep, cool. Alright, so now we'll start turning back towards that 267 because we have intercepted our course here. Alright, that's 267 right there. And now we're going to do our radial cross check, which is based off the attitude indicator here. And we're just going to go, some people call it radial, some people call it hub and spoke, where you start at the attitude, you go to your airspeed, back to attitude, down to turn coordinator, back to attitude, down to heading, back to attitude, and so forth. So we'll keep doing our cross checks to make sure we're remaining on course in instrument conditions. We're going to climb up to 3,000 because 3,000 or above is where we're going to want to be at the beginning of the approach. So let's climb up to 3,000. Alright, so we're approaching 3,000, so we're going to slowly level off here. Maybe gain a couple hundred more feet. Not a couple hundred, but a few more feet because we want to be 3,000 or above. There we go. And then we can level off. Put our power back to about 2,400 RPM. 2,400 is a good cruise power setting for the Archer. About 23 to 24 should be good. And we will maintain our altitude and maintain our heading here. Now, we are proceeding from Flying Cloud Airport direct to the Jonah waypoint here. Oh, we're in a descent. We'll get out of that. See, this is where it gets interesting. We're in IMC conditions, and we have a lot of cross-checking to do to make sure that we're not exiting the bounds of this approach or our instrument procedures. I do have a lot of back pressure going on right now, so I'm going to trim the aircraft to relieve that a little bit. Trimming the simulator is a little weird to handle still. It's very aggressive if you hold it for just a little bit too long. We're starting to turn a little bit too far to the right, so we'll go back a couple degrees to the left so we get back on our course here. Sweet. And we got about 5 miles to our waypoint, Jonah. And we're climbing when we don't want to, so let's go ahead and go back down and descend. And this plane is really wanting to climb right now. We'll walk a little mixture out of there since we are in warmer conditions and we're up at our cruise altitude. Excellent. What is this message telling us? Set course to 267. Okay. We can do that. See, the moment you look away for a second, you start losing one piece of maintaining control of the aircraft. You look away, you start banking, and then you fix your bank, and you start pitching, and, you know, this is why IMC is so dangerous, is because people, you know, might fixate, or they might lose focus. Spatial disorientation is a very real problem. So practice, practice, practice to avoid these issues. And you know, in my real life IFR training, I am kind of spoiled with the G5 avionics. It gives you, you know, wind correction angles. There is no precession. It's a very nice set of avionics to have. I feel like it's like the bare minimum to do IFR if you're going to do solo. If you have someone with you who is also IFR capable, steam gauges will be fine. But if you're doing solo IFR like what I'm doing right now, I would recommend having a very nice updated set of avionics. Can't seem to find that sweet spot that holds the altitude, the vertical speed to 0. Looks like it's just under the white line on the attitude indicator, but it's really wanting to drift in whichever direction I pull it. A little more towards 0 now. So we're on that 267, roughly 268. We're going to be making a right turn here once we cross over Jonah. So now it wants us to turn to 325. So we're going to make a standard rate turn, maintaining our altitude here, 3,000 standard rate, to 325. And we're going to pay close attention to make sure we roll out on that 325 when we want to do so. So right about there. We're also trying to incorporate the wind correction as well. Now we're climbing, so we're going to pitch down just a little bit. When you're in the clouds, you really want to focus on making small corrections so you don't put yourself too far into a bad situation where you start losing control. The harder the corrections, the harder the return corrections, I call them. Because you put yourself in a aggressive situation, and well, you have to make an aggressive maneuver to get out, and you wind up chasing what you're looking for, whereas if you just control the aircraft smoothly, you will, you know, be a lot more stable. The one thing I really don't like about this sim is just how difficult it is to control the trim. If this were real life, I'd be able to trim the wheel, and I would definitely feel, you know, the attitude definitely holding itself. Landing light can come off for now, fuel pump can come off. Forgot to do our climb check. We entered IMC pretty quickly. That's mainly climb check right there. Is fuel pump off, landing light off, check the engine gauges, which they are still in the green. Good to go. Pitot heat is remaining on because we are still in the clouds. We want to be at 3,000 or above. Let's get back to above 3,000. Neat. And the GPS is indicating that we're in the terminal phase. So there's 3 phases, you know, with an RNAV approach. Required navigational approach. Required navigational performance says there's the en route phase, the terminal phase, and then the approach phase. Right now we're in the terminal because we're over the initial approach fix, and now we're heading towards the intermediate fix, which is HUBEV. And once we cross over HUBEV, then we'll be in the approach phase. And we will begin our descent down to the runway. Again, I'm having a hard time really finding the sweet spot for this trim so I can keep my pitch right where I want it. So now we're getting back on track with the GPS course from Jonah to HUBEV. If you ever want the visual, you can flip over to the map and just double check yourself, which we're looking good there. Alright, and we got about 5 miles to HUBEV, so we're going to be just cruising, trying to hold our altitude and our track as best as possible. Because now that we're on a segment of this approach, track is going to be very important. Whereas if you're getting vectors, it's all about heading. think I've more nailed down the trim aspect of this. Seems to be a lot more stable. Our VSI seems to be sitting in the same spot here. Airspeed is consistent. We are straight and level on the turn coordinator. Heading indicator is indicating accurately. VSI 0, and altimeter is, we are pretty much at 3,000, but a little bit above, which is fine because that's where we want to be, is at or above 3,000. And then we want to be at or above 3,000 all the way to Hugh Bev, and then when we cross over Hugh Bev, we're going to descend down to 2,600. And our minimums are going to be 1,280, 1,280 feet. So 2.5 miles to Hugh Bev, which is the intermediate fix, and then Yabfi, or however you pronounce that, is going to be our final approach fix. So when we cross Hugh Bev, descend down to 2,600, and then 2 miles to Yabfi, we're going to get ourselves configured for the approach as necessary. Alright, 1.5 miles to Hugh Bev, so we'll expect a turn very soon here. And again, we're going to make sure that when we cross over Hugh Bev, this flips over to the approach phase, and it should tell us what kind of approach we'll get, whether it's LPV, LNAV, and VNAV, which is available for this approach, or just LNAV. And for the sake of this lesson, we will not be doing a circling approach, so we don't have to worry about those minimums at all. So let's say the winds were favoring 1-8, we would obviously shoot this RNAV, but then want to circle to runway 18. We're going to get a turn in just a second here. There we go. Now our track is going to be 360. We crossed over Hugh Bev, so now we're going to descend down to 2,600 while we're in the turn. A standard rate turn should do. Definitely don't want to descend that quickly. That's not good. I will say the plane's a lot easier to control in real life. Alright, so now we got a nice steady descent, 500 feet per minute, that's good. And we're tracking 360. The approach course is right, a little bit to the right of us, so we'll go a degree to the right side here to re-intercept that track and get it centered. And looks like we are getting LPV minimums, which are 1280, so that's excellent to see. We're going to get localizer performance with vertical guidance, alright. As you can see, that vertical guidance is right here on this lateral line on the navigational aid instrument, if you will. Alright, so 2,600. So now we will maintain this altitude, and now that our course is centering, we're going to make sure we're on that 000 track that it wants us on, which is basically 360. We're going to leave a little bit of power out to slow the aircraft down, because we are going to want to be at our approach speed of 90 knots. So mixture can go full rich. Let's get this carb heat in here so our engine doesn't ice up. There we go, carb heat's on. Let's make sure we don't descend below 2,600. You never want to go below an altitude restriction, because that's where all the obstacles in the terrain is. Alright, so we are getting LPV, we're looking good on the airspeed, our altitude's good, 2,600 or above. We're on track now, and once we hit 2 miles to Yabfi, we will get configured, if I could speak. Alright, 2 miles to Yabfi. So now we're 2 miles to the final approach fix. So we're going to do our fuel pump on, landing light is coming on, we're going to make sure our carb heat is on, mixture is rich, we're going to slow down to 90 knots. Oh, make sure we don't descend below 262 early. There we go. See, you focus on one thing for too long and it could all fall apart very easily. Instrument ain't no joke. Alright, so 90 knots. First notch of flap is going in. So we're one notch of flap and 90 knots all the way down on this approach. So now we threw a notch of flap in and we're slowing down. So now we want to add a little bit of power to get our 90 knots back. We're going to make sure that we're still on course as well. It does look like our LPV glide slope is coming in. So once we intercept that, we will follow it down. 90 knots, excellent. But our approach course is kind of to the left of us, so let's make sure we get back to that. Cool. Alright, now we have our glide slope coming in, so we'll pitch down, and it should have a standard descent rate of about 500 feet per minute. And we're just going to keep doing that hub and spoke cross-check as we're going down to make sure that all of our parameters are where we want them. So our descent rate kind of slowed down a little bit, so let's pitch down just a hair to correct that. Oh, walk some power out so we don't go too slow. Alright, so now that we're on the backside of the power curve and we're in the approach phase, we're going to start doing the backside of the power curve controls, right? So we're going to do power for glide slope and we're going to do pitch for airspeed. So our airspeed is kind of riding up towards 100. So we're going to pitch up to slow down, and we're going to walk a little bit of power out so we don't, you know, go too high as we're pitching up. So we're going to pitch up a little bit. There we go. Now we got our 90 knots back, and we're going to use our power for glide slope. So we're right on glide slope, but we drifted a little bit to the left of course, so we're making that right turn to get back on course just a little bit. And then if we see the runway, we will land just to give us a little bit of a break from all the work that we've been doing for this approach. Glide slope's looking really good. That's been pretty much pasted the whole time. I like that. Steady approach, 90 knots. Altitude's coming down. We're right on track laterally now. We're looking good. Still no sight of the runway, but we have until 1280. That's our minimums. Trying to maintain lateral control. Alright, and I do have the runway in sight. Alright, cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this into a landing and give ourselves a break, because hand flying can be quite exhausting. So 80 knots. We're going to go second notch of flaps here. Move the camera up a little bit so I can land this better. Knots, and now we're about a 1 mile final, so we'll go full flaps and slow down to 70 knots, our final approach speed. And then our VREF over the numbers should be about 65 knots. So now we're fully configured. Alright, runway is made. We'll go to throttle to idle, and then we'll walk in the flare and land nice and smoothly. Nice and easy. There we go. Nice easy touchdown. And we'll put in some braking, see if we can make the next taxiway. We're going a little bit fast. Nope, we got it. We can make it. Sweet. Excellent. Alright, we will cross the hold shoreline, and we will do our after landing checklist. I love the texture glitches. You got a nice glowing purple aircraft over here. That's excellent. Alright, so we're going to do after landing, which is, I do know flaps are fully retracted. The bar is all the way down. The carb heat's going to come out. The mixture is going to get leaned for taxi. So, fuel pump off. Landing light can stay on because we're taxiing. Mixture is leaned. Carb heat is off and flaps are retracted. Alright, let's go ahead and taxi back to the runway. And then once we're short of the runway, we will load our next approach, which is going to be the VOR Alpha into this same airport. And since we are taking off from this airport, we're going to go ahead and backtrack the VOR approach course, and we're going to do a procedure turn the way that a VOR procedure turn is meant to be. That should be a lot of fun. We are out of the clouds and on the ground, so pitot heat I'm going to shut off for a second. Now this is where my handy dandy radio is going to come into play, as I have nav frequencies, and since this is a VOR approach, we're going to use those nav frequencies to get to the airport. And then once I stop the aircraft, I'm actually going to get up for a second and grab my brand new watch that I got for Christmas, because it does have a stopwatch on it. Now, in IFR conditions, your clock that you use for your timing must be panel mounted for the clock to be legal. But since we are in the flight sim and this one's analog, I don't like really trying to figure out these analog clocks right here the way that they are, so I'm just going to use the stopwatch on my watch. But, you know, in real life, in real IFR conditions, the clock has to be panel mounted in the aircraft, so just keep that in mind for you real life flyers out there. Alright, we'll set the parking brake. I'm going to grab that watch real quick. Alright, watch is on and it's ready to go. So now I'm going to go to my foreflight and we're going to load the approach procedure in here. Now this is where it gets fun, because we have a GPS, but this isn't a GPS approach. So the GPS is only going to be for a backup, just solely a backup to this approach, but everything that you base what you do on has to be on the VOR radio and the frequency that you're on and all that. So what do we have here? So we're going to treat this like we don't have a GPS, but we're still going to load it into the GPS just as backup. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's go back to the GPS over here, and we do have direct to runway 36. Oops, that's not what I want. Let's see if we can load up Buffalo again, or if I'm going to be stuck. Because it knows we're at Buffalo, so that's probably not going to show up. That's fine. Let's go to procedure. We'll select another approach. We'll go VOR Alpha. We're going to start at... We're going to do it at Lordy, which is the final approach fix, and we're going to activate. And it says, you know, GPS guidance is for monitoring only. It's not for actually shooting the approach. So that's really important. But activate the approach. Of course, we want to do that. So we got Lordy and the procedure turn back to Lordy, which is exactly what we want based off of the direction we're going here. And I will pull it up on Sky Vector just to show you guys what exactly I'm looking at here. So right here, I'm looking at this approach, and the Buffalo Airport is right here on the left side where my mouse is, and we're going to take off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a left 270, a left climbing 270 to backtrack the final approach course here so we can make that procedure turn. And then we'll make this procedure turn, and then we'll begin the actual approach as it was designed to do. And you'll see that we have some timing tables over here. So for 90 knots, from the final approach fix to the missed approach point, which is the airport over here, 20 DME from Gopher, that's going to be 3 minutes and 20 seconds. So when we cross over Lordy, we're going to start our timer, and 3 minutes and 20 seconds is when we would go missed if we don't see the airport on time. And the only minimums for this approach are circling minimums, because that's what you're doing to, complete the approach and land on the runway. And those minimums are 1580. Now again, the ceilings at are about 900, so we should see the airport. So if we see the airport, we'll do another landing, give ourselves a break, and pick another approach to do somewhere down the road. Alright. So that's about it. And we want to be at 2,700, so we'll climb up to 2,700 and do the approach as necessary. The MSA, the minimum safe altitude is 3,500 all around Gopher, 25 nautical miles, but 2,700, since we're making a left climbing turn, we'll be on the track and we'll be clear of obstacles as we're on the approach course. Cool. Alright, so we loaded the approach, clear. Now I do kind of want to just see real quick what it looks like on this page. Excellent, so it has us taking off from the airport, going the opposite direction, making that procedure turn. Awesome. A little bit of hydration never hurt anyone. Alright. So the approach course is 266, so why don't we set up for that, right? So we have 266. Since we are going to be going opposite direction on that approach course, we want to put in the reciprocal, because if we put 266 and we back course, this final approach fix to go to the procedure turn, we're going to get reverse sensing because we're going to the Gopher VOR with a from indication. So what we want to do is we want to find the reciprocal to back course so we don't get that reverse sensing, which the reciprocal is going to be 086, it looks like. Alright, so we got 086 loaded in here. We're going to go to VLOC mode, because that's the mode that we want to be in. And we're going to go to our nav 1 because our main source of navigation is nav 1. This is going to be the Gopher VOR, which is 117.3 on the frequency. 117.3, we'll make that active. And then to identify the final approach fix, Lordy, we're going to go to nav 2, and we're going to throw in the Flying Cloud VOR, because that cross radial identifies the final approach fix. That's going to be 117.7. Throw that in active, and then we're going to turn this to the 328 radial, 328. And that's how we're going to identify our final approach fix. Okay. So awesome. So we got 117.7. Can we identify this? Yeah, no, we really don't got any of that. Okay, cool. So we got the approach loaded. We got everything set up. We have our courses. We have a V-lock mode on. We have our frequencies. Everything's tuned in just as how we want it. So let's go ahead and run the before takeoff checklist. Fuel quantity, looking good. We'll go ahead and switch tanks because now we're 20 gallons on the right side and we're full on the left side. So fuel pump's coming on. We'll switch tanks. We're on the left tank now. Excellent. Fuel quantity's looking good. Engine gauges are still in the green. Like to see it. Transponder 2000 altitude mode. Fuel pump is on. Landing light is on. Mixture, we're going to go full rich. The flaps, we're doing a normal takeoff again, so flaps are all the way retracted. Trim, we're just going to roll with that because we can't see. Seatbelts, we'll just say are secured, and then the takeoff commit point brief, we're going to run as previously briefed. Alright, we are ready for takeoff, and let's get ourselves on this VOR approach, shall we? Cool. Alright, oh, I forgot I turned the parking brake on. Let's go ahead and release that. And let us take off. Alright, very slight wind from the left side, so we'll have a little bit of left aileron for wind correction. Throttle full power and remains on the throttle. The airspeed is coming alive. Engine gauges are green. We do have takeoff power achieved. We'll slowly walk out the crosswind correction as we pick up airspeed because the relative wind is becoming more forward to the aircraft. 60 knots. We'll just start a nice easy raise of the nose. And 76 is our VY. So we'll try and maintain that to the best of our ability. And again, we're going up to 2,700. And that's going to be a left 270 there. So now what we're going to do is make that left 270. And then we're going to complete the turn based off of what our VOR indicator is telling us. So in real life, when you're filing an IFR flight plan and you're taking off from an untowered field like this airport, you either want to take off VFR, or if the field is IFR, you need to somehow maintain or obtain your clearance before you take off, and then you will get, takeoff instructions that keep you clear of obstacles and such. So, but in this case, we don't have ATC available, we have IFR conditions, whatever, it's all good, but we're just going to do our own left 270 here to get ourselves on the approach course. And this needle is starting to come in, so we're going to be on the radial we're looking for once we complete this turn. And again, that radial is 086. Now, where it's going to become difficult is when we're on that procedure turn, we're going to have to turn 30 degrees to the left, and we're going to count a minute out from the final approach fix. And then we're going to have to flip this all the way around back to that 266 that the final approach course is. So that's really fun. Pitot heat's coming on because we're in the soup. Fuel pump off. Landing light can go off for now. We're approaching 2,700 feet. So we're going to go ahead and try and maintain that VOR course 086. Coming up on 2,700 right about now, so we'll start slowly walking that nose down. We'll use trim to help us a little bit. 2,700, there it is. And we'll walk some power off to about 23 to 2,400 RPM for cruise. Little bit of mixture out of there. That was too much power walked out. Little bit of mixture out of there. Let's try and get back up to 2.7 here. So now we're on the back course here, where we want to be, and we will maintain that, keep that needle as centered as possible. So the course has gone a little bit to our right now, so we'll go ahead and try and get back to that. Now the thing about a VOR is it's a non-precision approach, and it is a very non-precision approach. the farther away you get from the VOR, you know, the less sensitive the needle is going to be. So that's kind of the thing with this approach is the Buffalo Airport is about 20 miles from the Gopher VOR, so the needle sensitivity is going to be quite low overall. So you're going to have a lot of movement before you actually indicate any bit off course. But the good thing is that we have a GPS for a backup, so if we need some help there to get back on track, we can use that. Alright, so we're just going to stay on there, and we are now picking up the Flying Cloud VOR on that 328 radio that we set ahead of time. So nav 2, once this needle centers, that is when we know that we have crossed the Lordy intersection, which is also the final approach fix for this approach. And then once we cross Lordy, we're going to give ourselves just a little bit of space, because you can make your procedure turn within 10 miles of the final approach fix, and you don't want to, you know, limit your space to where you're trying to do everything really quickly and at once, especially since a VOR approach is a high workload. So what we're going to do is we're just going to cross Lordy, and then we're going to give it just a couple of miles before we make that turn, that 30-degree turn to begin the procedure turn. Just to give us space, so when we get back on the final approach course, we have some time before we get to Lordy to basically reset or set up for the approach. Because remember, we want to configure, we want the fuel pump on, we want the landing light on, all of that stuff, but we don't want it on right now because we're back coursing the approach. Nope. And now actually I'm getting a little bit off course here. The course is to our left side a little bit. See, I got distracted explaining stuff to you guys, so I let my course kind of run off a little bit, but that's okay. Alright. So now we're on the course. We're a little bit on the right side of the path, but that's fine. So we're giving ourselves just a little bit of distance here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to now flip this to the VOR aid right here to the dang it. I keep accidentally clicking the scroll wheel, so it wants to do the camera thing. So now I'm going to flip this all the way to the reciprocal. And we're going to want this on 266. There we go, 266, right about there. And now we're going to turn 30 degrees to the left. So we're going to go about a heading of 056 at 2,700. And then once we level out, I'm going to start my stopwatch, and we're going to count a minute. And then a minute is how long you should be on this procedure turn for to stay within the limits of the approach. So now we're leveling off. Now my stopwatch has begun. So now once we indicate 1 minute, we're going to turn back around and intercept the final approach course. Now we're descending, which we don't want to do. We'll go ahead and, oof, jeez. This trim is not very friendly. I don't like the way the trim works in this sim at all, but it's fine. Deal with what you have. I just wish I could fine-tune it more, because that definitely helps a lot with keeping stability on an approach in IFR conditions. Your trim reduces quite the workload. Alright, so we're about 45 seconds, so we'll be making our turn back around very shortly. And that's a minute right there, so we'll stop that, reset it, we'll make our standard rate turn back around to the approach course. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to level off on the reciprocal of the procedure turn. So that 06, we're looking for a 236 heading. and then we'll stay on 236 until that final approach course starts coming in on the VOR nav aid there. So we'll level off at 236. We're climbing when we don't want to be. Oops, don't want to descend that aggressively either. So we'll level off there. This is fine on the heading. This shouldn't be an issue at all. Climbing again. Yeah, the trim on this is just really not fun to try and maintain by any means. Okay. Alright, so now you should have, you should have DME to do this approach if you want to identify how far away from the final approach fix you are. But we don't have that, so once we get on course, we'll just go ahead and set up for the approach as we need with the fuel pump and all that. We'll configure properly. Trying to really get this trim to work in my favor, and it's not wanting to do so very much. Alright, so that needle is starting to come center, so we'll watch that. We'll configure now. We got our fuel pump on, landing light on. Mixture's going to go full rich. We're going to turn the carb heat on, just so it's ready by the time we start our descent. And then we're going to have our timer ready for when we cross over Lordy. So now, we're on our VOR approach course. We're descending again when we don't want to be. Boo, the trim. Alright, so our final approach course is 266. I kind of overdid that rollout a little bit, so we'll fix that, get back to a 266 heading so we can maintain that track. There we go. Alright, so now we're 2,700, right where we want to be. We're at about a 266 heading. Our needle is quite centered. So now, when the second VOR here centers, that's going to identify Lordy, and that's when we're going to start our timer, and we're going to begin our descent down to 1580. And the 1580 is an MDA, so we'll descend down to 1580, and then we'll hang out there until either we see the airport or we hit that 3 minutes and 20 seconds and have to initiate a missed approach, depending on if we see the airport or not. So we're just going to keep on watching. We're watching that second nav aid that's starting to come in, so we're going to be at our final approach fix very soon. Don't want to descend all that much. Oh yeah, so now we're going to slow down to 90 knots. First notch of flaps is coming in. And now we're configured for the approach. I'm going to be at about 90 knots on the dot, because the clock is very reliant on that. Might have to do a little bit of a wind correction. It looks like our course is a little bit to our right side. We got a from indication, and that's from the VOR, so we are on the correct radial. Our OBS is set correctly. Still struggling with the trim here. That's fine though. We'll adjust as necessary. Alright, so now this is centered, so we can begin our descent here. We're going to start our timer. Oop, we definitely don't want to descend at 1,000 feet per minute. That's bad. But now we're going to 1580. Well, if only I could figure out the trim. Alright, so now we got our 90 knots. We're straight and level. We're on a good heading to maintain our track. VSI was indicating a 500 foot per minute descent, so that was good for a second. We're going down to 1580. I do have ground contact, which is a good sign, but we're not going to rely on that. We're going to keep focusing on these instruments to make sure that we're on course and everything we're doing is correct. We're going a little bit fast and our descent rate's a little bit high, so we're going to walk off some power and pitch up to reduce the airspeed. Nope. Add a little more power and pitch up to reduce the airspeed. Ah, brother. So we've got 1 minute in. Oops. Checking my watch and the plane went way out of whack. There we go. Now we're on a good heading here on a normal descent rate. Again, we want 1580. Visibility is still pretty poor, so we're not gonna... Okay, we're almost coming up on 2 minutes. And then what I'm going to do, just to show you guys, is I'm going to overfly the airport and do a teardrop to final, because I just kind of want to show you where 3 minutes and 20 seconds is, and 3 minutes and 20 seconds is, and how timing plays a very big factor in shooting a VOR approach. So now we're at about 1580. We'll maintain 1600 just to keep an even number. I do see the beacon of the airport, so that's a really good sign. And we're coming up on 2.5 minutes, and it's still a little bit ahead of us, so that's really good. So we'll pick up our speed to get back to 90 knots, because maintaining 90 knots is going to be the key to that 3 minutes and 20 seconds being like pretty much right on top of the airport. That's really good. Alright, coming up on 3 minutes now. We are under the clouds, which is good. So you can kind of see the airport underneath us here. And we're coming over the runway. About 90 knots, so we're making up that time. So we're coming up on 3 minutes and 20 seconds very shortly here. And look at that. The runway is directly underneath us, and that was 3 minutes and 20 seconds right there. So we stop the stopwatch, reset, and now we'll go ahead and we'll make a landing here. So approach design is very important, and the timing is very key when it comes to VOR approaches, especially if you don't have DME. Not having DME is exactly why there are timers on the approach. And, you know, people might be reluctant to rely on such things, because you do have some factors working against you. One of the biggest things is wind correction, right? You know, the time is going to be a lot more if you have a lot of a headwind coming at you. If you have a tailwind, the time to the airport's a lot less. But, you know, pretty aggressive wind conditions are accounted for when an approach is designed. So, you know, it'll definitely give you a big safety buffer. It's not like you're going to be unsafe if your 3 minutes and 20 seconds is, you know, beyond the airport because you have a 40-knot tailwind. They account for winds of that nature, and yeah. So I have the airport inside. I'm doing kind of that teardrop entry to final. It's not easy because I'm using the mouse as my camera instead of just being able to turn my head. Cool. Alright, so now we're on a bit of a base. We'll speed up a little bit. I want 80 knots on base here. Alright, now we're going to turn towards final. And now we're too fast. Oh man. Overshot a little bit. That's unfortunate. Alright, we're on final. We'll do our final notch of flaps. We'll pitch up and pull the power back. Pitch up to get 70 knots. Power back to drop on the glide slope a little bit here. Maybe a little bit of a side slip just to get lower faster. There we go. Now we're looking a lot more stable. Okay. Now we're on glide path and we're where we want to be. We have 70 knots on our airspeed indicator. Sweet. Runway's made, throttle idle, and we'll bleed off that airspeed. Touchdown nice and smooth. Come on, baby. Nice. Doing a bit of a wheelie here. Ah, we're not making that taxiway. Tried to do some aerodynamic braking, but it didn't have the effect that I thought it was going to have. So it looks like we're getting off at the other end. Shame on me. Oh, nope, there's one taxiway before the end. Cool. Alright, we'll go ahead and clean up here. Flaps are going to be fully retracted. The carb heat's going to come all the way off. Fuel... Ooh, excuse me. A little bit of an air pocket. Fuel pump is coming off. Pitot heat's coming off. We'll leave the landing light since we're taxiing. And mixture can get pulled back to avoid fouling of the spark plugs. And we'll do the same thing we did last time. We'll taxi to the other end of the runway. And then we will load our next approach, which is going to be the ILS, back into Flying Cloud. And, you know, if no one joins in by then and gives me a suggestion, we'll end stream there. But for now, we'll expect the ILS into Flying Cloud and the stream to end there. That's what I am feeling like is going to happen here. As we're taxiing to the runway. VOR approaches are definitely a very, very high workload. You have to worry about timers, you have to worry about your VLOC track, your navigational aids being tuned to the right frequency and so forth. You know, you can throw your GPS on and do whatever you want with the GPS, but that is only a backup for a VOR approach. So everything else still, the VOR frequencies and all that still have to be your main source of shooting this approach. Now, there's a lot of VOR alphas that are starting to turn into RNAV alphas. Like there's an airport just northwest of this airport, Buffalo, Minnesota, where there used to be a VOR alpha to that airport, but the VOR that approach was based on is out of service, and so now they turned it into an RNAV alpha, so the GPS can be used for that approach. In fact, that's the only way you can get into that airport now, IFR. But for an approach like this is still a VOR alpha, and there is no or RNAV alpha. I've seen that as well, VOR alpha or RNAV alpha, so you have the choice to use either, which is just fine, but this approach in particular does not have the option to be an or RNAV, so, you know, GPS is backup only, and then you got your timers, you got your tracks, you got a lot to work on when you're doing a VOR approach. So task saturation is really real, and that's why you want to be as ahead of your aircraft as possible and do everything as early as possible to avoid getting behind the aircraft, getting disoriented, and, you know, having issues later on. So now let's go ahead and get the ILS 10 right at Flying Cloud loaded, and we'll figure out how we want to enter this approach from there. Approach. ILS localizer, runway 10 right. Alright, so we don't really have too many options coming from the north here. We could fly right on top of the airport, the airport, and either back course the ILS and do the barb procedure turn. We could overfly the field and go straight to the initial approach fix, which is FASIP, and that's a DME arc to intercept the localizer, but that's 13 nautical mile DME arc. from the Flying Cloud VOR, so that begins 13 nautical miles south of the airport, and you have to wrap around to intercept the ILS. So, you know what? Why don't we do that? We have some time to kill. Why not? Let's get her loaded up. Our course is fine for now. Alright, cool. So we got 20 gallons in the left tank, and then we'll stay in the left tank, and we'll switch our fuel tank once we get on the initial approach fix for this final approach that we're doing for the night. Alright, so let's go to our direct to page. Oh, yep, there it is. Cool. Let's go ahead and put FCM, Kilo, Foxtrot, oops, Foxtrot, Charlie, Mike. We'll activate, we'll load the procedure, select approach, we'll do the ILS 10 right, we'll begin at FASIP, which is south of the field in the beginning of a DME arc. As you can see here, it kind of lays out a picture for you, which is really nice. We'll hit activate. GPS guidance is for monitoring only, so again, this is an ILS approach. This is not a GPS approach, so the GPS is a backup only, but the GPS will help us get direct to FASIP, which is going to be really nice. And the order of waypoints looks really good. This is the lead radial to the localizer, and then Zamud is the next waypoint. Alright, that looks good to me. So now let's go ahead to GPS mode, and we're just going to verify that we are direct FASIP, which we are, so that's good. We'll load up the ILS frequency in our, we'll do that in our nav 1. So the ILS is going to be 109.7, so we'll put that in active, and then nav 2, we're going to have on the Flying Cloud VOR, which is 117.7. Neat. And so when we're doing the DME arc, we're going to be using our secondary VOR nav aid here to do our DME arc. And the arc is going to begin on radio 175. So let's put that in ahead of time, just to have it ready to go. You know, in real life, these OBS knobs move a lot faster than that. So 175, right about there. Cool. Then we got that loaded in. We'll do our approach course. We'll wait until the GPS tells us what it wants the course to be. 147, 151. So let's put in 151 since that's what it wants for now. 151. Alright, so we got the approach loaded in the GPS as a backup. We have our frequencies tuned in, which is really good. And we have our OBSs set as need be. So we are set for this approach. We do have DME because our GPS for this approach is going to act as our DME. So we don't really have to worry about a timer. But this approach does have timer settings in case DME doesn't exist. So let's go ahead and get our before takeoff checklist here. Alright, so the fuel quantity is still looking good. Again, we'll switch tanks before we start this approach. Engine gauges are still in the green. Yes, they are. Transponder, altitude, 2000, good there. Fuel pump is coming on, landing light is on. Mixture can go rich. Flaps are retracted, trim is fine, seatbelts are secured, and takeoff commit point brief as previously briefed. Alright, we are in GPS mode, so now our GPS is going to take us direct to the FASIP waypoint, which is excellent. I love to see it. And let's take the parking brake off, and we're ready for takeoff. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a climbing right turn, I believe. Yeah, why don't we go ahead and make a climbing right turn? That'll be good for us. Alright, let's go ahead and take this runway. know what, I'm just going to show the approach. I'm going to line up and wait on the runway and show the approach that I'm looking at. Just so you guys can see. I'm hoping that when I get my tax returns, I'll be able to get Navigraph, because that'll make this a lot easier for sure. Point cloud, ILS localizer 1 right. Alright, cool. So this is what I'm looking at here. So this is the airport, and the Flying Cloud VOR with DME is right here. That 175 radial is what we're tuned into, and this is where that turn 10 twist 10 is going to start. So we're going to go over the VOR. Well, actually, we're direct to the waypoint, so we're going to go direct to the waypoint. Then we're going to turn 90 degrees from 175, which is going to be 255, and we'll follow 255, 255, turn this 10 degrees towards the west, and we're going to keep doing that turn 10, twist 10 until we get to our lead radial of 271, and then 271 will turn to get a 30-degree intercept on the localizer, and then we'll follow the ILS from there. You know, the minimum altitude is 2,600 for the DME arc, so let's see. It wants us at 2,700 for Zamud, so why don't we go ahead, just to give us a little bit of a safety buffer, we'll do 2,700 as we're doing the DME arc, and intercept the ILS at 2,700. That should be just fine. We'll have a glide slope come in to help us out there. Alright. Neato. Sweet. Let's take off and get this final approach going for us. Little bit of a crosswind from the left, so again, left aileron. And our forward speed is picking up, so we'll walk out that crosswind correction. "60 knots, we'll pull back nice and easy, get this baby in the air. That's about 500 feet. We'll go ahead and make that right turn to intercept our direct to FASIP. Maintaining that 76 knots. So now we're starting to get out of VFR conditions, so we'll go to our standard rate turns. And then we're going to go a little bit past this 151 desired track just to intercept the direct 2 that we loaded previously. And you know what? We do have 30-something miles to FASIP, so let's try and see how far up we can climb and see if we can get above this cloud layer and get a little bit of that VFR on top experience. So that's always a fun one. So we're 1,000 feet, so fuel pump off, landing light off, pitot heat's coming on because we are in the clouds, we are in visible moisture. Our track is starting to slowly come in, we're slowly getting centered here, so we'll leave it on that 20-degree path right there and intercept it as necessary. Really curious if we can get above this layer. Probably can. Little VFR on top in real life, it's a lot of fun actually. It looks like a bunch of cushions beneath you. I'm sure a lot of you have flown on airliners and have seen that kind of thing, but it's a lot different when you're the one controlling the aircraft. You're the one that's flying IFR and things are, you know, different. It's pretty sweet. Alright, so we're starting to get close to intercepting that track, so we'll start making our turn back to tracking 151 so we can keep that needle centered. Neat. Oop. And we are definitely pitched up way too much there. Focusing too much on the track. Don't want to get disoriented. There we go. Alright, so we're coming up on 4,000 and it is starting to get brighter inside of the cockpit, so I think we're going to be reaching the tops of the clouds very shortly here. And what's nice is we still have 35 miles to reaching FASIP, so if we start a late descent and do the DME arc during a descent, that's fine. Descending in the arc is not bad. I mean, it is going to be 13-mile DME arc from the airport, so. Oh, I am left, or right, of course. Got to turn back to the left here. Paying too much attention outside to see when I break out of the clouds. Distracting myself. The sun's really poking through. Ooh, I see some blue. Oh, look at that. What a gorgeous breakout. Oh man. I love that. It's always amazing when that happens in real life too, when you just come out of it and you see this nice blanket underneath you and to the sides of you and stuff. It's amazing. Kind of a weird blackness coming from the top of the clouds. That's not typical. So yeah, why don't we cruise at about 5,000 then, since this is where the VFR on top begins. Alright, now we're getting in our cruise setting. Be as on track as possible, especially when we get close to FASIP, just to make sure that this DME arc that it goes exactly how we want it to go. I want to cruise at 5,000. We seem to be climbing beyond that. I cannot, for the life of me, figure out this trim. There we go. Now let's get back to 151. Stay on top of that track. This thing is climbing. Why is it climbing? Alright, there we go. Think you can stay at 5,000, or are you going to keep trying to climb? I think it's going to keep trying to climb. Let's get a quick exterior view while we're at it. Look at this, VFR on top. I think that these clouds, maybe because of their density, are having a very weird shadow effect. Normally you don't see that weird darkness above the clouds, but maybe it's just an in-game rendering thing because of the shadows and the ray tracing and all that. Stay at 5,000 feet, and we got about 28 miles to FASIP, which is just fine. And we'll just cruise for a while until we get to FASIP. Should be about 15 minutes, it looks like. Just realized that the power setting was about 2500 RPM. I thought I walked that out, but maybe not as good as I intended on doing. Oops. So just to see, when we hit 13 miles away from FASA, when we're 13 miles from this waypoint, I'm going to flip over to the map and we should see ourselves right on top of the Flying Cloud Airport according to this GPS. Because this waypoint is 13 DME from the Flying Cloud VOR, so we should be roughly right above the airport. We may be a little bit offset because we're coming from the northwest and we're going direct to the waypoint instead of following the radial that, you know, FASIP's on. But we should be relatively right over the airport. In fact, it'll probably be a little bit to our left, so we'll actually be able to see it on the GPS. Our little plane won't be in the way here. So to get on the DME arc, since we're heading about 151, 152-ish, instead of a 90-degree turn, we are going to be making more of a 110-degree turn to get on that 255 radial here. not radial, heading, 255 heading, and we're going to turn 10, twist 10, that whole deal. So 13 miles, airport should be to our left. Boom, right there. So yeah, we're a little bit off. It is to our left here. We'll increase the range. But what do you know? FCM right there. We're perfectly aligned with it. 13 DME. We're good. I just really like this page because you can line up your current track with the direct track to help you get back on course. So we're a little bit to the left of the course, right? So I can turn to a 152, 153 heading to slowly intercept that and get it centered again, and then turn back to the 151 desired track. And then, you know, same thing if we were a little bit to the right of course, we turn left to 149, 150, something like that, and recenter that needle. VFR on top is looking really nice right now. Forgot to walk out a little bit of fuel mixture there. We're at a higher altitude, so we definitely want to do that. We climbed up a little bit more than I anticipated to climb, so let's get back down to 5,000 as intended. So we're about 10 miles to FASA. Looking really good on this approach so far. Well, we're not on the approach yet, but looking good at coming up to the approach, I guess you can say. Good, 5,000. Just to pick up a little bit of speed, I'll go ahead and start initiating a descent down to 2,700. Maybe not so aggressive of a descent again. Really struggling to nail down this trim. Okay, for once I finally got a pretty decent trim setting. We're at 500 feet per minute. We're descending. Gonna go down to 2,700. So that's where we want to be on the approach. It looks like we're going back into the clouds. Here we go. Back into IMC conditions. Almost looks like smoke in the cockpit right now. It's not what you want to see. I think it's just the sun glare interfering with the vision, but it almost looks like there's a little bit of smoke in here. It's concerning. I once did an IFR flight in real life when it was last year when the Canadian wildfires were bringing thick smoke to the Minnesota area, and I just remember practicing some IFR approaches, and you could smell the smoke inside of the cabin, and you know it definitely throws you off for a second when you smell smoke inside of the cockpit when you're in a plane in the air, but you recognize pretty quickly that, oh hey, it's the wildfire smoke. That doesn't smell anything like what's in my airplane, which is good. But yeah, now it's looking like it's clearing up a little bit and less smoky, if you will, less glare. Don't want smoke, that's never good. miles to FASIP, and then we'll be making that 110-degree turn to the right. We're going to be heading 255, and we're going to twist 10 and turn 10 all the way to the lead radial of 271, and intercept the ILS approach course and shoot the ILS into flying cloud, and that will be it. Oop, I'm way off course. Well, I'm not off course, but I will be if I keep on this heading. Alright, so we're going to want that turn to come very shortly. What do we got here? DME arc right there. Alright, why don't we go ahead and make that turn now since the GPS wants us to. Oh, make sure we're still descending down to 2,700, not at 1,000 feet per minute, but, you know. So we'll turn this 10 degrees to 185. And then we'll level off at 255. Cool, 255, there we go. Oh, we're climbing, don't want to climb. Oh, the trim. I really wish it would help us here. That's a very fast descent. Out of control. Once this needle centers, we'll turn to 10 degrees to the right and twist the OBS 10 degrees to the right. We're at 2,700 now. Let's get back up. Jeez, that's an aggressive climb there. There we go. Now we're starting to be where we want to be. Okay. Cool. This needle is about to center any second. It is a 13-mile DME arc, so it's definitely going to take a little while to reach the 10-degree marks. So let's turn this 10 degrees to the right, 195. Let's turn to 265 right there. Oops, we are climbing. Don't want to do that. Jeez. I promise I am much better at handling the Archer in real life. Flight sim is definitely not the way to do it. So I'm actually going to turn this to V-lock mode, so the ILS is in there. And the ILS approach course is 098. So we're going to throw that in there. Just to keep turning to our course a habit. And we'll actually just go ahead and flip it to the map now. So you want to be within 13 miles of the Flying Cloud VOR, but it's really hard to kind of identify where that is. You would have to direct to the Flying Cloud VOR in your GPS in this particular aircraft to do it. Well, we're centered, so we'll turn 10 degrees to the right. Turn this 10 degrees to the right. 205, excuse me. Still want to be at 2,700. We kind of went below that a little bit. You know, the point of the DME arc is to stay on that 13 DME from the Flying Cloud VOR, but we don't really have a way of doing that besides direct toing the Flying Cloud VOR. We're just not going to bother with that. We'll keep the approach loaded in our GPS since it's already kind of too late to do that. Well, we'll certainly use it as a backup. Alright, that needle is starting to center, so we'll turn 10, twist 10 in just a second. Alright, turn 10, twist 10. So 215 on the radio, and we'll turn 10 degrees to the right. A little more aggressive of a turn than I wanted to make, but that's fine. Just going to keep doing this over and over again until we get that 271 lead radial, and once we cross that 271 lead radial, we'll turn to a heading of 128 to give ourselves a 30-degree intercept on the localizer, and then we will shoot the ILS from there. I'm definitely falling off course a little bit here, so we'll go back. There we go. Alright, cool. Get back down to 2.7. Our altitude's all over the place. Trim's not really helping us much either, trying to maintain that altitude. Oh yeah, we should have switched tanks. Fuel pump on, switch tanks, there we go. I forgot about the fuel tanks, that's unfortunate. That needle's about to center, so we'll turn 10, twist 10 in just a second. Alright, that needle is centered. 225. Turn right 10 degrees. Don't want to descend all that much. What is going on? I will say I'm making pretty small corrections to the aircraft, but the altitude is running wild on these small corrections. I'm not really sure it would be, I don't think it'd be that aggressive in real life, to be honest with you, so. Okay, let's get back above 2,700 because we want to be at or above, not below. Trying to get the trim so I don't have to keep pulling back on the yoke, but here we are. Man, it's dropping down again. Just cannot nail the trim. This needle's about to center again in just a second. There it is. So we're turning 10 degrees to the right, twisting this 10 degrees to the right. And it looks like we're falling off of that 13 DME, which is where we want to be, but that's fine. We'll just keep doing as we do. We're just going to pretend that we have a DME stack and it's saying 13. How about that? See a 500 foot per minute descent for a 2-degree shift in nose pitch. It's kind of crazy, but whatever. This trim, I don't like it. So now that we know how the DME arc works, I'm just going to go ahead and cut some time off of this approach, and I'm going to head straight to the north, and we're gonna intercept that lead-in radial of 271. 271 like so. And we'll wait for that lead radial to come in. A 13 DME arc is a pretty long and slow one, so we're just gonna skip it in this case. We know that we're, you know, safe at our current altitude right now. Well, actually, safe altitude is actually 2,800 here, so we'll climb up to 2,800 just to be safe. We are totally IMC right now, and we don't want to hit anything. So 2,800, there we go. Beautiful. Come on, trim, do me some justice for once, eh? Nope. Keeps wanting to dip below the horizons. What message we got now? Set course to 333. No, sir. I am on the ILS. Alright, so based off of this waypoint right here, it looks like we are coming up on our lead radial relatively shortly, which is good. And then we will intercept the ILS and bring her on down. Our minimums are 1106. But again, the ceilings are about 900, so we should be able to land just fine. So on a DME arc, yeah, you're doing the turn 10, twist 10, but you really need to have some kind of DME showing you how far away you are from the VOR that you're doing the arc off of, which we didn't do because we only have one GPS. We already loaded the ILS approach just as a backup, so we tried doing the turn 10, twist 10. We fell off a little bit. We went about a mile off of the 13 DME, I think, so we might have been leaning more towards 14 DME, but that's fine. It's a sim. Just don't do that in real life. And if you need to do the DME arc via GPS, that's fine, as long as you do the arc somehow. And we fell below our altitude again. You know, that's fine. I'm just gonna keep it at 2.7. Why not? I think we're safe there. There's nothing obnoxiously tall in this area. I'm very familiar, so we're just doing what we do, sim-wise. Excuse me. Descended below. Whoops. 2,700. Stay there. Don't go anywhere else. I almost wonder if looking for an actual trim wheel for the sim would help in this case, because this is terrible. And now we're in a constant climb, and I barely put any trim input at all. What do you know? That lead radial is starting to come in, so once that's center, we'll turn right heading, not 128, delete. we're going to be at 068. If we turn 128, we're going to be going away from the localizer. That could have been a really bad mistake on my part. So we're turning 068. That is the 30-degree lead vector that we're going to do. Alright, so that needle's centered. Let's go ahead and turn right heading 068. We should start seeing a glide slope come in relatively shortly here. Standard rate turn, maintain 2,700. We should be established relatively shortly. I'm going to start walking out that turn just a little bit. We're coming up on the 068. There we go. Alright. We're going to wait for that localizer needle to start coming in. Nail the pitch trim down. Whatever. As long as we're staying on the approach, it don't bother me none. So it looks like we might be intercepting the glide slope before we do the localizer, which is really interesting. 'Cause generally, you could be at 3,000 here and still intercept, or maybe I'm just seeing things. It looked like the glide slope was kind of dropping down a little bit, but that doesn't actually seem to be the case. Oh, there we go. We're getting the localizer and the glide slope is still above us. Okay. I am crazy. We're good. Alright. That needle is starting to come in. We'll gradually turn to intercept it. And our lateral course will be maintained, maybe a little less aggressively. It's kind of aggressive. Now we'll slide to the left a little bit just to get that centered. Could also use this page to help us a little bit. Send yet. Alright, fuel pump is coming on, landing light's coming on. I'm just going to get ready for the approach now so we don't fall behind here. Alright, mixture's going rich, carb heat's going to come on, pitot heat's going to remain on for now. And then we'll do the first notch of flaps, 90 knots, at the 2 mile from Stuber mark. Stuber is our final approach fix. Air localizer is running off to the right of us a little bit, so let's re-intercept that. Want to maintain our altitude until that glide slope comes in. Trying to get this trim to do what I want it to do. Glide slope is starting to come in. I like to see it. Alright, so now our glide slope is coming in. So once we cross that, we're going to make sure the altitude restriction is 2,600 or above at Stuber, and then the localizer down. The glide slope intercept is at the final approach fix. But since we're at 2,700 instead of 2,600, we're going to intercept that glide slope a little bit early, which is fine. We're in the sim again. We don't really care all that much. All right, glide slope is intercepted. Let's initiate a 500 foot per minute descent. We're in the white arc. First notch of flaps down. Let's get 90 knots. Normal approach speed. Walk some power out so we get down to the glide slope again. We're a little bit above. Pitch down for airspeed. Trying to get to the right a little bit so we can maintain localizer again. Now we're on glide slope. Walk power back in. Pitch down for 90 knots. Trying to maintain our airspeed. I do have some ground contact. Okay, power up a little bit. The glide slope is above us now. The localizer's looking pretty good. We're at 90 knots. Starting to increase speed a little bit, so we'll pitch up. Walk a little power off. That glide slope finally came in. We've intercepted. Looks good. Pitch for 90 knots again. I'm doing that hub and spoke cross check as I'm going through this to make sure I get all of the gauges, but the main reference is the attitude indicator. That's the most important one in this case. Looks like our localizer is starting to go to the left of us a little bit, so let's turn left just a couple of degrees to re-intercept that. 90 knots is good. Our glide slope is looking good. Airspeed 90 knots, straight and level, heading indicator. Alright. We're at a mostly normal descent rate as well. Our glide slope went a little bit above us, so power is getting added. There we go. Now we're on glide slope again. Minimums are 1106. We're going to remember that, keep that in our memory. However, I do see the rabbits, they just popped up, that's good. Our glide slope is getting under us a little bit, so let's walk some power out. Pitch down for airspeed. There we go. I see the rabbits, but the runway's not in sight enough for my liking yet, so we'll keep following the ILS system down. Alright, now I'm starting to see the runway how I want to see it. We have visual, we're above minimums, we will continue to landing on this approach. Now that I have visual, I'm going to start slowing down, walking flaps in, getting to our final approach speed. Second notch of flaps, we want 80 knots. Alright, we're roughly about a mile out, so the last notch of flaps is coming in now, and we're going to slow down to 70 knots. These trees are a little bit tall. It's not exactly how it is in real life. I am a little bit above the glide slope though, but those trees are taller than what they actually are, so that's interesting. We'll get back down here, there we go. Pitch up for 70 knots. The runway is made, we'll walk off the power, level off, and then get our flare in, and let that nose very lightly come down. Very lightly. Sweet. Nice easy touchdown. Cool. And we want to go all the way down to Echo, so we're going to go down to Echo. Not going to apply braking just yet. That's Foxtrot. So the next left turn should be Echo here. Okay, Echo coming to the left. Let's clean up the flaps. Let's go ahead and take the carb heat off. Mixture can lean out a little bit. Fuel pump's coming off. We're crossing a runway. Well, pitot heat's coming off. Crossing a runway, that's fine. And then we'll go back to the parking we came from, and it will be end of stream from here. Alright, we're pulling onto the ramp, so landing light's going to come off. There's a building that exists here, by the way. Don't know why it doesn't in the sim. It does in 2024, but it doesn't in this sim for some reason. Big old building right here, an FBO at this airfield. Kind of weird that it's just non-existent, but whatever. Alright, that's right. So we'll double check the after landing checklist. We got the transponder. We'll throw that on standby. Fuel pump is off. Landing light is off. Mixture is leaned. Carburetor heat is off and the flaps are indeed retracted. So we'll go to shutdown check. Parking brake is set. Avionics can get turned off. Electrical equipment off except for anti-collision lights, which that is the case. We'll go throttle 1000 RPM. Okay, and then mixture cutoff. Wait for the engine, the prop to stop spinning. There it is. Now the mags can come off. Anti-collision lights are off. Battery master and alternator are off. Right. Alright. We are now done with the flight and we can exit the aircraft. Oh, okay. You have to push the armrest. There we go. Right on. Alright. Cool. So, there it is. I wanted to do something, you know, a little more fun, a little different for this. And since I am, you know, actively training for my CFII, I thought it'd be fun just to hop in a Piper Archer and do some practice approaches the way that, kind of the way that we would do them in real life. Just to get that practice in, but do it in the sim and see how it goes. I was hoping someone might tune in and tell me or give me a very fun, challenging approach to shoot wherever it might be, but that wasn't the case. But that's fine, because people can watch this later and maybe they might learn a thing or two. In fact, I hope they do. That would be really cool. I would like to teach someone something for once, but yeah. So that was a good time. A little bit of a debrief. Everything was just about fine except for my altitude control. My altitude control was definitely all over the place because, well, the trim control in this sim is very odd. I have it set to like the electronic trim if there was one on the yoke. But for aircraft like the Archer, the Cessna, anything with a trim wheel, it doesn't act, you know, realistically to the trim in real life. So that's a bit of a problem. That caused my altitude to be all over the place, and I maybe instead of paying so much attention to the trim, I should have just, you know, flew it by hand. But there's a lot of back pressure, and your arms get tired after that much back pressure, so you want to try and trim if you can, but, you know, ultimately you want to fly the plane and do what you're supposed to do on the procedures. The DME arc back into Flying Cloud was also a bit of a mess. We tried doing the twist 10, turn 10, but we didn't have anything that gave us our DME from the Flying Cloud VOR, so we technically weren't properly following the DME. We were doing the turn 10, twist 10, but without the DME portion of it, you're kind of really not making sure you're still on that track and doing the right thing. So either if you're going to do it that way, the turn 10, twist 10, you might as well put the Flying Cloud VOR in your GPS Direct 2, use that as DME, or you just follow the arc as is on the approach, keep your GPS or your navigation aid on GPS mode until you are about to intercept the localizer, switch to V-lock, and then do it. But yeah, anyway, that's about it. Everything else went just fine. Our landings were really good. The approaches were really good. The VOR was a lot of fun to do in the sim. It's kind of difficult because trying to turn the OBS knob on your nav aid is very slow compared to real life. In real life, you can just, you know, whip that thing around and do a 180 in a second or two if you really wanted to, but not the case in the sim. Made it a little more difficult, but we got it done. It was interesting. Love that. Don't know when I'm going to stream next, but, you know, I'm going to try and come up with some fun stuff. I'm really just hoping that 2024 updates soon. We get some kind of update going soon. Because I want to get back into career mode. I want to start a company. I want to do a lot of things, but I'm not willing to do so with all the bugs that are involved. So, still waiting on that update. Don't know when I'm streaming next, but we'll try and keep it interesting. But until then, I hope people who may watch this video later on, you watch it, you learn something from shooting approaches. Anything that I teach you guys over the stream is for simulator use only, but it's good practice for me since I'm studying my double I, and you know, anything that I teach you, you can use in the sim. So thanks to anyone who did tune in. Thanks to anyone who might be watching this later. If there's anything you guys want to see, leave a comment, suggest something. I'll see if I can make that happen. But thanks for tuning in. All right. Have a good night. And until next time, see ya!